There's a truth that might shock you. Some of the worst narcissists you've ever encountered were sitting right next to you in church, quoting Bible verses and pretending to be the most devoted Christians in the congregation. Wayne Dyer always said that when we're ready to see the truth, the universe conspires to show us exactly who people really are behind their spiritual masks. If you've ever felt confused, manipulated, or even guilty after interacting with someone who seemed so holy and spiritual, I have a revelation for you. You weren't imagining things. You were dealing with one of the most dangerous creatures that exist, the narcissist disguised as a Christian. They are masters at using faith as a weapon, transforming sacred verses into instruments of control and manipulation. But there's something powerful happening when you finally awaken to this reality. God Himself begins to expose these masks, one by one, revealing the true nature of these people. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the unmistakable signs that the universe itself uses to reveal these wolves in sheep's clothing. You'll learn to recognize when God is exposing a Christian narcissist, and more importantly, how to protect your spiritual energy from these emotional vampires who hide behind the Bible. Prepare yourself, because what you're about to discover might completely change your perception of the people around you. Wayne Dyer used to say that the most dangerous people are those who have learned to use spirituality as a tool of manipulation. And I need to tell you something that will make you rethink many situations you've lived through. Christian narcissists are some of the most sophisticated manipulators that exist. They don't come to you screaming, cursing, or being obviously toxic. No, they come carrying the Bible, talking about God's love, offering prayers and demonstrating humility that seems genuine. They know exactly which words to use to touch your heart and make you lower all your defenses. But there's something they can't hide for very long, the desperate need to be the center of attention, even in the most sacred moments. Have you ever noticed that person who always has a more dramatic testimony than yours? Who always needs to pray louder than others? Who turns any spiritual conversation into an opportunity to talk about their own experiences with God? They are masters at creating this image of being chosen, special, having a unique connection with the divine. And the cruelest part is that they use your genuine faith against you. When you question their behaviors, immediately you become the non-Christian, the judgmental one, the one being used by the enemy. What's most disturbing is how they manage to make you doubt your own spiritual perception. You feel something is wrong, but they're so convincing in their biblical quotes, so eloquent in their prayers, that you start to think the problem is with you. Wayne Dyer always emphasized that true spirituality brings peace, not confusion. If someone is using faith to leave you confused, guilty, or questioning your own sanity, that's the first red flag God is raising for you. By the way, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to know where the people who are awakened to these spiritual truths are located. But what comes next is even more revealing. When God decides to expose a Christian narcissist, the first sign He gives us is glaring, but we often miss it because we're focused on the beautiful words they speak. The sign is this: everything they do spiritually is performative. It's pure theater. You'll notice they can't have intimate and silent spiritual moments. Every prayer needs to be heard by someone. Every act of faith needs an audience. Every experience with God needs to be shared in minute detail, always placing themselves as the protagonists of the story. I knew a woman who, whenever she talked about her prayers, made sure to mention how God spoke specifically to her, how she received special revelations, how her prayers were always answered miraculously. At first, people were impressed, but over time it became obvious that everything was acting to feed her ego. The true Christian, as Wayne Dyer always observed about genuinely spiritual people, has humility in their faith journey. They know that real spirituality happens in silence, in intimacy with God, without needing approval or admiration from others. But the Christian narcissist, can't resist the temptation to turn every spiritual moment into an opportunity to shine. They quote verses not to edify others, but to show how knowledgeable they are of the Word. They share testimonies not to glorify God, but to be seen as special, chosen, different. And here's something that will make you recognize this instantly. Observe how they react when they're not the center of attention in spiritual contexts. When another person is sharing a powerful testimony, they become restless, interrupt, or quickly redirect the conversation to their own experiences. They can't genuinely celebrate others' blessings because for them, that means fewer spotlights for themselves. It's as if there's a constant spiritual competition in their minds, where they always need to be the most blessed, the most used by God, the most spiritual. Wayne Dyer always said, you know a tree by its fruits. And the fruit of the Christian narcissist is always the same, leaving people around them feeling spiritually smaller, questioning their own faith, or striving to impress instead of simply being. But wait until you see the next sign God uses to expose them. The second sign God gives us to recognize a Christian narcissist is devastating when you learn to see it. They transform Bible verses into weapons of emotional manipulation. Wayne Dyer always warned about people who use spiritual concepts to control others, and in Christianity, this reaches frightening levels. They are experts at distorting scriptures to justify abusive behaviors. Honor your father and mother becomes an excuse for narcissistic parents to demand blind obedience. Wives, submit to your husbands becomes a license for controlling husbands. Judge not is used whenever someone questions their toxic behaviors. But the cruelest thing is how they manage to make you feel sinful for establishing healthy boundaries. When you try to protect yourself from their toxicity, immediately you hear, "That's not Christian love. Jesus would forgive. You're being resentful. A true Christian would be more understanding." I counseled a woman who lived in an abusive marriage for 20 years. Every time she tried to confront her husband's destructive behavior, he bombarded her with verses about forgiveness, submission, and unconditional love. He managed to convince her that questioning the treatment she received was questioning God himself. The Christian narcissist is a master at creating spiritual guilt. They make you believe that your self-preservation instincts are lack of faith, that your healthy boundaries are lack of Christian love, that your discernment is sinful judgment. Wayne Dyer always emphasized that true spirituality liberates us. It doesn't imprison us. When someone uses spiritual principles to make you feel smaller, guilty, or imprisoned, that doesn't come from God. It comes from that person's wounded and narcissistic ego. They're also experts at using spirituality to avoid responsibility for their own behaviors. God forgave me, you should forgive too. We're all sinners, only God can judge me. These phrases become shields against any form of accountability. The difference between a genuine Christian and a Christian narcissist is crystal clear when you learn to observe. The true Christian uses the word to transform themselves. The narcissist uses the word to control others. The true believer submits to biblical truth. The false believer forces the Bible to submit to their whims. And there's a third sign even more revealing that's about to shock you. The third sign God uses to expose Christian narcissists is something Wayne Dyer identified with surgical precision. False humility that can barely hide an inflated ego hungry for admiration. They are masters of performative humility. I'm nothing. It's just God working through me, they say, but watch their eyes while they speak. They're waiting for you to contradict them, for you to praise them, for you to recognize how special and humble they are at the same time. It's a perverse psychological game. They diminish themselves verbally so that others will elevate them. And when you don't take the bait, when you don't reassure them about how wonderful they are, you can almost see their irritation growing behind the spiritual mask. I've observed this dozens of times, the Christian narcissist who is always putting themselves down, but never accepts when someone agrees with their self-pity. "Oh, I'm terrible at leading," they say, but if you respond, "Maybe someone else should lead then," you'll see an explosion of defensiveness or poorly disguised anger. Wayne Dyer always said that true humility doesn't need to announce itself. Genuinely humble people don't keep talking about their humility. They simply live it. But the Christian narcissist can't resist making humility another performance to impress others. They also have a compulsive need to be seen as the most devoted, most sacrificial, most committed Christians in the community. "I pray 3 hours a day. I fast twice a week. I give 30% of my income to the church." There's always an implicit spiritual competition where they need to be the champions, and observe how they react when others receive spiritual recognition. When someone is praised for an act of faith or service, the Christian narcissist can't simply celebrate. They immediately need to share something they did that was even more impressive, more sacrificial, more spiritual. True humility brings peace to those around. The false humility of the Christian narcissist leaves everyone feeling inadequate, spiritually competing, questioning if they're good enough Christians. And when you learn to recognize this false humility, you also begin to see how they manipulate situations to always come out as the spiritual heroes of the story. But the fourth sign will leave you speechless. The fourth sign God gives us to identify a Christian narcissist is absolutely revealing. Observe how they react when you show genuine vulnerability. Wayne Dyer always emphasized that our vulnerability is where our spiritual strength truly resides, but for the Christian narcissist, your vulnerability is just another manipulation opportunity. When you open your heart, when you share your pain, your fears, your deepest spiritual struggles, the Christian narcissist can't simply be present with you in that sacred moment of openness. They do one of three things: minimize your pain, use your vulnerability against you, or turn the moment into an opportunity to talk about themselves. I remember a devastating situation a friend experienced. She was going through a period of deep spiritual doubt after losing a child. When she shared this with someone she considered a mature Christian friend, instead of receiving comfort and understanding, she heard, "You need to have more faith. I've been through worse things and never doubted God." That response didn't come from a compassionate heart. It came from someone who can't tolerate other people having deep emotional experiences that don't revolve around them. The Christian narcissist sees your vulnerability as a threat to their role as the spiritually strongest. But there's something even more disturbing. They store your vulnerabilities as ammunition to use against you later. That intimate confession you made in a moment of trust becomes the weapon they use when they want to humiliate or control you. Remember when you said you doubted God? Maybe you're not the right person to have an opinion about this. Wayne Dyer always said that truly spiritual people honor others' vulnerability as something sacred. They understand that when someone opens their heart, they're offering a gift of trust that should be treated with reverence. The genuine Christian, when you show vulnerability, creates a safe space. They listen without judging, offer comfort without conditions, and sometimes simply stay silent with you in your pain. They don't try to fix you with verses or quick solutions. They simply love you where you are. But the Christian narcissist can't stand not being the center of attention, even in your moment of pain. Your vulnerability makes them uncomfortable because they don't know how to respond with genuine empathy. They only know how to use everything to feed their own ego. And when you recognize this pattern, the next sign becomes impossible to ignore. The fifth sign God uses to expose Christian narcissists is powerful and infallible. He allows crises to reveal the true character of these people. Wayne Dyer always observed that moments of pressure reveal who we really are underneath all our masks. And with Christian narcissists, this revelation is dramatic. When life gets difficult, when prayers aren't answered as they expected, when they can no longer maintain the perfect facade, Their true nature explodes like a volcano. And it's in this moment that God is clearly showing you, look closely, see who this person really is. During a financial crisis, the Christian narcissist who always preached about generosity and faith becomes stingy and desperate. During illness, the one who always talked about accepting God's will becomes bitter and rebellious. During relational conflicts, the one who preached love and forgiveness becomes vindictive and cruel. I witnessed this when a church went through a split. The Christian narcissists in leadership, who always spoke about unity and brotherly love, became the most vindictive and destructive people in the situation. They spread gossip, created factions, destroyed reputations, all while quoting verses about forgiveness and reconciliation. What's most revealing is how they react when God doesn't favor them the way they think they deserve. Their entire spirituality was conditional. They loved God while God was fulfilling their desires. But when God allows them to go through tribulations like any other human being, their true relationship with the divine is exposed. It was transactional, not transformational. Wayne Dyer always talked about how genuine spirituality sustains us exactly in the most difficult moments. Truly, spiritual people may not understand why certain things happen, but they don't lose their loving and compassionate essence during crises. The Christian narcissist, on the other hand, has no deep spiritual roots. All their spirituality was superficial, based on how others saw them, not on a genuine connection with God. So when the storm comes, there's no real substance to sustain them. And it's exactly in this moment that God is giving you the clearest gift possible. You're seeing who this person really is when all the masks fall. Don't ignore this divine gift. Don't justify, don't make excuses. Simply accept the revelation being offered to you. Because the next sign will show you something even more shocking about how they react when confronted. The sixth sign God uses to expose Christian narcissists is infallible and always unmasks them. Observe how they react when gently confronted about harmful behaviors. Wayne Dyer always said, "You know a person's true character not by their good days, but by how they respond when challenged with love and truth." When you, in a respectful and loving way, point out a behavior that hurt you or hurt others, the narcissist's Christian mask immediately shatters. Instead of humility, you see anger. Instead of reflection, you see deflection. Instead of responsibility, you see victimization. They immediately become the persecuted person in the story. Everyone is against me. Nobody appreciates everything I do. I was just trying to help. They can never simply say, "You're right, I was wrong, forgive me." That would be death to their inflated ego. But what's even more revealing is how they use spiritual language to avoid responsibility. "I'll pray about it" becomes a way to never actually have to change. "God knows my heart" becomes an excuse not to explain their actions. "Forgive as Christ forgives" transforms into a demand for you to accept continued abuse. I knew a church leader who, when confronted about favoritism and partiality, immediately started quoting verses about not touching the Lord's anointed. He turned a conversation about inappropriate behavior into a spiritual battle where questioning him was questioning God. Wayne Dyer always observed that genuinely spiritual people receive feedback as a gift, even when it hurts. They know that spiritual growth requires humility to recognize where they need to improve. But the Christian narcissist can't tolerate the idea that they're not perfect in others' eyes. The true Christian, when confronted with love, may initially feel uncomfortable or defensive. That's human. But they process, reflect, genuinely pray, and often return with a grateful heart for the opportunity to grow. They see correction as love, not as attack. But the Christian narcissist sees any feedback as an aggression against their worth as a person. They can't separate behavior from identity, so questioning what they do is questioning who they are. And since they've built an entire identity based on being good Christians, Any suggestion of imperfection is intolerable. And when you understand this, the final sign becomes crystal clear and prepares you for what to do next. The seventh and final sign God uses to completely expose a Christian narcissist is the most powerful of all. He orchestrates situations where their hypocrisy becomes so obvious that even they can no longer deny it. Wayne Dyer always talked about how the universe has a way of revealing truth at the perfect moment. And with Christian narcissists, this revelation is always dramatic. There comes a moment where the contradictions between what they preach and how they live become impossible to ignore. The pastor who preaches about faithfulness is caught in adultery. The leader who talks about humility is exposed in scandals of pride and greed. The person who always talked about Christian love is seen treating others with cruelty and contempt. But here's what's most revealing. Even when confronted with incontestable evidence of their hypocrisy, they still can't take genuine responsibility. They make performative confessions, ask for forgiveness manipulatively, and quickly try to return to positions where they can continue controlling others. I witnessed this when a church leader was exposed in multiple lies and manipulations. Instead of true repentance, he organized a victimization campaign where he was the persecuted one, where spiritual forces were attacking him, where everyone who questioned him was inspired by the enemy. Even in complete exposure, he couldn't stop manipulating. Wayne Dyer always said that when we're ready to see the truth, it becomes undeniable. And God, in his infinite mercy, doesn't allow us to continue being deceived indefinitely. He creates opportunities for us to see clearly who is really in our lives. The moment of final revelation is always a divine gift, even when it's painful. It's God saying, "You deserve genuine relationships. You deserve people who truly live the values they preach. Stop accepting less than that." The difference between a Christian who sins and genuinely repents versus a Christian narcissist is glaring at this moment. The true Christian, when exposed, breaks in real repentance, changes behaviors, accepts consequences, and does the internal work necessary for transformation. The Christian narcissist just changes masks. And when you finally see this truth with crystal clarity, you're ready for what I'll share in the final chapter, how to protect your spiritual energy and never be deceived again. Now that God has opened your eyes to recognize Christian narcissists, you need to know how to protect your spiritual energy and never again allow these wolves in sheep's clothing to drain your faith and your peace. Wayne Dyer always emphasized that knowledge without action is useless, so let's put this wisdom into practice. First, trust your spiritual instincts. If something doesn't feel right, if you feel drained after interacting with someone who should edify you, if you question your own sanity after spiritual conversations, that's not paranoia, it's divine discernment. God gave you intuition for a reason. Second, establish firm spiritual boundaries. You're not obligated to accept abusive behaviors just because they come wrapped in Christian language. Jesus himself confronted religious hypocrites harshly. Christian love doesn't mean being anyone's emotional doormat. Third, surround yourself with genuine Christians who live what they preach. People who make you feel loved, accepted, and valued. Who celebrate your victories without competition. Who support you in defeats without judgment. Who demonstrate the fruits of the Spirit consistently and naturally. Fourth, develop your own intimacy with God independently of validation from others. Christian narcissists thrive when you need their approval to feel spiritually accepted. But when your identity is grounded in God, not in religious leaders or communities, you become immune to spiritual manipulations. Finally, use your experience to help others. Wayne Dyer always said that our pain becomes our purpose. When you recognize Christian narcissists, you can gently alert other vulnerable people. You can be the instrument God uses to open the eyes of someone who is suffering spiritual manipulation. Remember, God never uses people to diminish, control, or manipulate you. True Christians reflect Christ's character, love, humility, compassion, grace. Anything different from that doesn't come from God, regardless of how many verses the person can quote. You deserve relationships that reflect God's true love. Stop accepting spiritual crumbs from people who use faith as a tool of control. Your peace, your faith, and your spiritual energy are sacred gifts from God. Protect them with discernment and courage.